So what I want to do tonight is talk about the immaterial jhanas, jhanas 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, in the suttas, they're only referred to as the immaterial states. So in the suttas, we find the 4 jhanas and the 4 immaterial states. And at times, we do find them all put together to make 8 continuous altered states of consciousness with concentration. So it makes sense to refer to them as the 8 jhanas. But that reference didn't come for a long time. I think it is actually even post-commentarial. Most places talk about the 4 jhanas and the 4 immaterial states. The 4 jhanas are, excuse me, the 4 jhanas are sometimes referred to as the rupa jhanas. Rupa means materiality. It's not that the jhanas are material, but they are experiences we have experienced in the, in the material world. So we have all experienced rapture, happiness, contentment, and quiet stillness in our regular lives. Hopefully we experience them frequently, but yeah, everybody knows what we're talking about here. In fact, there's a great simile in the Visuddhimagga for the first 4 jhanas. You're lost in the desert. You don't have any water. It's a pretty precarious position. You come over a little rise, and in the distance you see what looks like palm trees. It might be an oasis, might be a mirage, but you head towards it, and it doesn't change. And eventually you meet people, they have wet hair, they have bundles of wet clothing. It's an oasis. You get really excited, first jhana. You come to the oasis, it's beautiful, lots of shady trees, big pool of water. You are so happy. Second jhana. You get in the water, you cool off, you can drink the water. It's so refreshing. You are satisfied. When you get out and lie down under the shade of a tree and have a rest. 4th jhana. So this really is what it's like moving through the 4 jhanas, from excitement to happiness to contentment to quiet, still equanimity. The 4th jhana often people say is very restful. Sometimes it feels like I must have had a nap, except I know I didn't fall asleep. It can be that restful. But these higher jhanas, so-called, are not like anything we've experienced in the material world. And so they are referred to as the aparupa jhanas. Arupa states is their official name in the suttas. So immaterial states or immaterial jhanas. So in order to get to these higher jhanas, it's going to be very necessary you have a very good 4th jhana. The transition from 4 to 5 is the most difficult transition of all, even harder than 0 to 1. So you're going to need, a lot of really good concentration. Most people in the 4th jhana find themselves sort of slumped over a bit. It's just so restful, so down that, you just can't be bothered to sit upright. If that's the case, you need to pull your energy up and get yourself upright. And then, here, by passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, by the disappearance of all sense of resistance, and by non-attraction to the perception of diversity, seeing that space is limitless, one reaches and remains in the experience of limitless space. That clear to everybody? No, I don't think so. All right. So by passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, this is why you need such good concentration in Jhana 4 before you try to move to Jhana 5. It's not that in the higher jhanas you can't find your body. It's just that you are so focused on the object of the higher jhanas, you don't notice your body. If you check to see, oh, do I still have a body? Yes, you will find you have a body, and that will take you out of the jhana. Okay? But if you're concentrated enough, you just forget about the body sensations. They're just not making their attention known. So by passing entirely beyond bodily sensations, the disappearance of all sense of resistance and non-attraction to perception of diversity, seeing that space is infinite. Let me just give you the instructions. Okay. So Ayakema told me was coming out of the fourth jhana, get in touch with the boundaries of my being, whatever that means to you, and then expand them to fill the room. And once I had them filling the room, expand them to fill the meditation hall, the whole building. And then once I got that, expand them to fill the retreat center. And once I had that, just keep expanding until I hit the horizon and keep going. The keep going needs to go smoothly without any sense of resistance. Okay? If you're doing the expanding and it gets stuck, you have to push through it or change and go in a different direction or something like that. And by non-attraction to the perception of diversity. So when I started, I'm in the meditation hall, there's diversity there. And then I'm in the building, that's diversity, and I'm on the retreat center. And then there's the village around the retreat center. And finally I hit the horizon and I just go. And I don't go past the moon, Mars, Jupiter, anything like that. It's just expand. The key point is to keep your attention on the outer edges of the expansion. If you can do this, eventually a vast empty space appears before you. You'll automatically put your attention on it. That's the fifth jhana, the experience of limitless space. If you look for the space, you're not staying focused on the expansion, and you won't get to the fifth jhana. So you just have to do the expansion. Now, you could expand the boundaries of your being like Ayakema told me, but it actually doesn't matter what you expand. I had one student who took an imaginary balloon and blew it up bigger, until it eventually popped, and there was the limitless space. She was also the one who took a flashlight, torch, beam, and followed the light further, until it illuminated the space. I've had people talk about riding a rocket ship, taking an elevator, anything you can do to get your attention out and away limitlessly. And as I say, don't look for the limitless space. You have to stay focused on the outer edges. But eventually, if your concentration is strong enough, and if you don't get distracted by looking for the space, a vast empty space appears. If you're visual, you will see the space. It might be off-white, light gray. It may or may not have a horizon line, or it could be just black, like outer space, but with no stars, planets, galaxies, just empty black space. Okay? There's a very tiny sense of an observer that you probably won't notice the first few times you're in the fifth jhana. But when you reflect on it, the space was before me. And if it's really good, it's before me and below me and behind me and above me and all around. And tiny, tiny observer and just hanging out suspended in the midst of this infinite space. But mostly for me, it's in front of me. And I'm not noticing the observer. Okay? If you look for the observer, you'll find it, but that also might dump you out of the infinite space. Okay? If you're not visual, you'll somehow feel the infinite space in front of you. I'm a very visual person, and I always see it. But I've had students who were not particularly visual, but they could tell there was a big space that just opened up in front of them, and they could feel that it was there. So either way, and because its arrival is kind of dramatic, it's going to be obvious that this is where you put your attention. So you're focused on the unlimited space. Now, it's often called the sphere of infinite space or the base of infinite space. At the time of the Buddha, they didn't have the concept of zero. I doubt they had the concept of infinity. But they did have the concept of limitless or unbounded. So limitless space or unbounded space. And the word that gets translated as base or sphere or realm actually is ayatana. Ayatana is your sense organ and the sense object. So your ear and the sound, that's an ayatana. The eye and a sight, that's an ayatana. We don't have that concept in English of the organ and the object being referred to with one word. But they do have it in Pali. And so rather than say sphere or realm, which makes it sound like you've gone someplace else, I just want to translate it as experience. When you hear a sound, it's an experience. It's the experience of hearing. It's the ayatana of hearing. And so similarly for this. But when you see the sphere of infinite space or something, you know what they're talking about. I'm just trying to use words that are more closely related to what the Buddha was thinking. Like all of the other jhanas 2, 3, and 4, you can stay there as long as you want. It's probably good to learn to stay there for 10 to 15 minutes. And you're just focused on the big space. That's it. If you want to move on to the 6th jhana, and by passing entirely beyond the experience of limitless space, seeing that consciousness is limitless, one reaches and remains in the experience of limitless consciousness. Okay, not much in the way of instructions. All right, you're in the 5th jhana. There's this vast space. You know it's vast. You can tell there are no limits, no boundaries. Your consciousness must be as big as its object. I mean, if it wasn't, how would you know? So your consciousness is already huge. The trick is to shift your attention from the space to your consciousness of the space. It's sort of like a turning back from the space and becoming aware of your awareness of the space, becoming conscious of your consciousness of the space. If you can do that, it will feel like you've been absorbed into the space, and now your mind, your consciousness, is as big as the space was. There's not really any separation between you and the 6th jhana. You are the limitless consciousness, right? People who are visual generally describe it as dark. That's it. There's not really anything to see there. It's just dark. So you keep your attention on basically how big your consciousness is. If you come from a spiritual tradition where the whole goal of spiritual practice is merging with Atman or some overconsciousness or something like that, you might be confused and think that's what you've done, right? I mean, I have a limitless consciousness. I must have merged with all the consciousnesses in the universe, right? No, you're just having an experience that you are interpreting as I'm experiencing that my consciousness is unlimited. That's all. Now, it's true, the orthodox understanding of these higher jhanas, or actually of all the jhanas, is that you are visiting one of the deva realms, one of the heavenly realms. So when you go to the third jhana, you're actually going to one of the heavens. I'm not buying it. Okay. There's evidence in the sutta that the Buddha wasn't buying it either. So when you're experiencing limitless space, you haven't gone to some place where there's limitless space. And when you're experiencing limitless consciousness, you haven't tapped into the universal limitless consciousness or anything. It's just an experience you're having. When we have an experience, we try and interpret it. And the obvious interpretation of jhana 5 is, I'm experiencing a limitless space. In jhana 6, I have a limitless consciousness. Okay? Well, they say the orthodox, they want to talk about heavens, but yeah, I'm not buying it. You're just having an experience, and this is the obvious interpretation. Now, if you get the 6th jhana really, really well, you might find that it feels like there's a few other little consciousnesses in here and a few over there. It's not like you could read the minds of other people in the room or anything like that. It's just an artifact that shows up. I've been in the 6th jhana many, many times. I mean, I couldn't say well over 1,000, I'm sure. And I've only had it happen for me maybe 6, 8, 10 times, where there's other little consciousnesses in there. It's pretty rare. And every single time I was way more concentrated than usual. So if that happens, yeah, it's kind of cool, but it doesn't mean anything. Again, you want to be able to stay there for 10 to 15 minutes, get good at it. And then you can move on to the 7th jhana. And by passing entirely beyond the experience of limitless consciousness, seeing that there is no thing, one reaches and remains in the experience of no thingness. It's here given as no hyphen thingness, which actually is quite good. Of course, not any instruction on how to get there. The best way to get there is find a sense of nothing, a sense of no thing. One way to do that is to look at what the limitless consciousness is conscious of. And actually the feeling of space is long gone, and there's nothing that the consciousness is conscious of. Put your attention on that nothing, or get some other sense of nothing. And when you lock your attention in on that nothing, it may not be a very big nothing. I get it about the size of a volleyball. In front of me, there's nothing. But if I look at the edges, there's nothing there either. Now I got a beach ball size nothing. All right, look at those edges, nothing. And over time, it gets to be a bigger nothing. It never goes infinite like jhanas 5 and 6. But there's nothing. Just nothing at all. If you're visual, then you will see it in one of two ways. The most common way is it's black and there's nothing there, or it's deep purple or dark blue. There's just, you see that there is nothing. The other way is, remember on the old TV, when you put it to where there wasn't a channel, there was black and white static? Can you imagine black and black static? Some people, when they get to the seventh jhana, they see black and black static. There's this movement, but there's nothing. It's just, they can't say what's moving. It's just a feeling like there's movement. This is often called the sphere of nothingness. But I think no thingness is much better. It's like you've got the biscuit jar and you take the lid off and you look, oh, nothing in there. No thing in there, no biscuits, no cookies, right? Only there's no jar. There's just no thing. Or you go down into the basement and you hit the light switch and it doesn't work. And you're trying to see what's in the basement. And as your eyes begin to get adjusted, you can tell there's nothing right in front of you. And they get a little more adjusted. Well, there's nothing back there either. Until finally they're well adjusted enough. There's nothing down here at all. A completely empty basement. This is not the same as the emptiness that's talked about in the Mahayana or in the suttas. This is just, there's nothing there. Sometimes people stumble unexpectedly into this state. I know this because people on retreat come up to me occasionally in their interview and say, can I tell you about something that happened to me? And it's like, yeah, sure. Well, I was on the 3-month course at Insight Meditation Society, and I was just doing my insight practice, and I fell into the void. Oh, what was that like? It was really scary. Well, what'd you do? Well, I went running to the teacher, and what'd they say? They told me to go take a shower and get something to eat and don't meditate for 3 days. Well, it sounds to me like you fell into the seventh jhana. Well, I don't know, but it was really scary. Okay, they go away. They eventually learn the first 6 jhanas. They come in, yeah, that's the 6th jhana. Here's how you get to the 7th. I don't know if I want to go back there. No, it'll be fine. I give them the instructions. I send them away. They come back 3 days later. Yeah, that's right where I was before. But it wasn't scary this time. The reason it was scary was because they didn't know what was happening. There's nothing to be frightened of. In fact, it's my favorite jhana. There's nothing there to bother me. It's a great place to hang out. Okay? So that's the 7th jhana. And by passing entirely beyond the experience of no thingness, one reaches and remains in the experience of neither perception nor non-perception. Perception is a translation of the Pali word sanya. The sanya is, it's our conceptualizing of our experience, our naming it, our identifying it. For example, can people see the bird and the flowers? Can you see that? Yeah? You see the bird and flowers? There's no bird or flowers. There's only colored shapes. The bird and flowers are in your mind. You take those colored shapes and you convert them into bird and flowers. That's sanya. That's the step that you are taking. And it's actually completely necessary. We can't take in the whole universe at once. We have to break it into bits and pieces, right? And then we identify a bit or a piece, and I can eat this and I can't eat that, and we know what's going on, at least on the relative level. So sanya is a very important part of processing our sensory input. As I say, it's usually translated as perception, and I want to translate it as conceptualization. So the 8th jhana is the experience of neither conceptualizing nor not conceptualizing, neither perception nor non-perception, neither identifying nor not identifying, neither naming nor not naming. I don't guess that helped a lot. Okay. It's a state that has no characteristics by which you can describe it. But you can stay in the state that has no characteristics by which you can describe it. That's about the best I can do. The good news is, if you're good at Jhana 7, at the experience of no thingness, it's fairly easy to find the 8th jhana. All you've got to do is let the nothing collapse and come to rest in front of your face. And then you're in a state that you can't describe. And you can stay there if your concentration is good. Now, the 8th jhana is far more fragile than any of the earlier jhanas. If this is, say, the 3rd jhana, and this is the contentment, and this is your focus on the contentment, you're focused on the contentment, but you start getting distracted, and the contentment starts to go away. Oh, you get back in time. Yep, all right, it's back. But if you're gone for too long, when you come back, oh, it's gone. But it is possible to wobble, and you wobble, and the contentment starts to fade, but you get back to it. That can even be in the 7th jhana. There's nothing, and you better not be gone for long, but you can get back. In the 8th jhana, you might have time for one brief sentence, very simple sentence that doesn't contain the words I, me, or mine, right? I couldn't tell you the number of times I've gotten into the 8th jhana. It's very clear it's the 8th jhana. I'm there, and then I find myself in the middle of a paragraph of a distraction. I have no idea how I got there. Just disappeared. And usually there's no trace to go back to. I got to go back to 7 or 5 and work my way back up again. So much more fragile than any of the previous jhanas. So these are the immaterial states, the so-called arupa jhanas. They basically will give you a mind that's even more concentrated, clearer, sharper, brighter, more malleable, more wieldy, more given to imperturbability for doing your insight practice. I notice coming out of 4, I have a certain degree of concentration, indistractability. My ego is quiet for a certain length of time. Coming out of 8, I'm more concentrated, more indistractable. My ego stays quiet for an even longer time. So this just ups the strength of the concentration that you've built over what was in the first 4 jhanas. The higher jhanas appear to be optional. It seems that if you can get through all 4 jhanas, this is sufficient for doing really profound insight practice. Now, you can do profound insight practice with no jhanas, but if you're going to work with the jhanas, 4 seems to be like, okay, this is a great place to do insight practice, and you jump out there and start doing your insight practice. That's what we had in the story last night. It didn't mention these arupa jhanas. It just went through the first 4, and then one started doing the insight practice. Now, there is a state that is sometimes referred to as the 9th jhana. It's never called that in the suttas. The state is referred to in the suttas. It's the state of the cessation of Vedana and Sanya, the cessation of feeling and perception. Nirodha Vedana Sanya. Now, the word Nirodha just means cessation, and you've got to be careful when somebody starts talking about Nirodha. I was able to identify 7 different contexts for the word Nirodha. So are they talking about the so-called 9th jhana? Or are they talking about the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion? Or the cessation of dukkha? Or, there's a bunch of ways it could be talked about. But this cessation of feeling and perception is sort of a state of suspended animation. You might have heard about, somewhere in India, there's this sadhu, and they dig a pit and he gets in it and they cover it over, and then 3 days later they uncover it and he's fine. Yeah, he's put himself into this state of basically suspended animation, this state of Naroda. There's a movie called Shortcut to Nirvana. It's a documentary on the Kumbh Mela festival that was held in India in 2001. I think 20 billion people came. Makes something like Woodstock seem like a backyard picnic. But yeah, it's a very fun and interesting documentary if you can find it. It used to be available on YouTube, but that seems to have disappeared now. And it's got all these sadhus. It's got the Dalai Lama, and it's got some more sadhus, and yeah, very interesting. And there's a scene in there where they've dug a nice pit. Looks like it's about 8 feet deep. And they put a ladder down into it. And this Japanese woman climbs down the ladder. They pull the ladder out. They put roofing tin over the pit. They cover the roofing tin with dirt. New scene. More sadhus. The Dalai Lama shows up again. Still more sadhus. 3 days later, they come back and they're sweeping the dirt off the roofing tin. They pick up the roofing tin and put the ladder down. The Japanese woman climbs out all happy and smiling. She must have been in the state of Naroda. So the astronauts, the guys with the right stuff, yeah, they put those guys in a sensory deprivation tank, an isolation chamber. Yeah, the ones that lasted the longest lasted maybe 8 hours before they started hallucinating. You know, they couldn't get beyond that. Yeah, this little Japanese woman, she's down there for 3 days in a isolation system. She had to be in the state of Naroda. Another experience I can tell you about the state of Naroda. I was in Thailand once for Thai New Year's. Thai New Year's is a festival. It's in April. It's at the end of the hot season, the beginning of the rainy season. And it's when the Thais would do their spring cleaning. And the tradition developed after you wash the Buddha statue. All Thai Buddhist households would have a shrine with a Buddha statue. So after you wash the Buddha statue, you would take some of the water and sprinkle it on the hands of your elders to salute their Buddha nature. Well, in modern times, the sprinkling has gotten out of hand, and everybody in the country is throwing buckets of water on everybody else in the country. Highly participatory festival. You step out of your guest house and you're met with a bucket of water. You better have your own bucket, right? So I was in Chiang Mai, which was the center of the festival, and I go down to the main square, and the Thais have set up these spigots that come out. And if you put a 1 baht coin in, which was worth 4 cents when I was there, water would come out of the spigots, and they put big barrels under the water. And they'd see me coming, and they'd go, 1 baht, 1 baht. And I would put a 1 baht coin in, and the water would come out. And then I could refill my bucket, which, of course, I had to empty on the way to the square because, yeah, that's what's going on. It's pretty chaotic. I mean, a bus comes by, people throw in buckets of water in the windows of the bus. If you come by in your car with the window down, yeah, you're going to get a bucket of water in. If you come by on a motorcycle, yeah, you got no windows, right? Yeah, and the people driving around in pickup trucks with 55-gallon barrels of water on the back, throwing water at all the people on the sides of the street. And of course, you've got to throw water back at them, and chaos, absolute chaos. But in the main square, just, not far from where all this chaos was happening, they'd set up a little pavilion. And seated in the pavilion was a monk. He was sitting in full lotus. His eyes were open and downcast, and he had the most serene look on his face I had ever seen. It was quite inspiring to see somebody sitting there meditating where 30 yards away it's total chaos. He was there that afternoon when the big parade came by. He was there that night where they had the first round of the beauty pageant. You know, loudspeakers, music, everything, 20 yards away. He was there the next morning. He was there all day. He was there that night when they had the second round of the beauty pageant. He was there the third morning. He looked a little tired, serenely tired. He was there that afternoon when the biggest parade of all comes by. He was there that night when they had the finals of the beauty pageant. He was gone the next day. He had to be in the state of Naroda, to sit there without blinking, without moving for 3 days. Yeah, this guy was gone. Quite inspiring. The other thing I can tell you about the state of Naroda. So I mentioned Powok before and how, I was supposed to follow my breath for 3 or 4 hours, and then sometimes I'd smile and get really strong jhanas. Well, I sat with him again, only this time for 4 months. And I actually got to the forest refuge where he was going to be teaching 2.5 months before he got there. So I would have my 6 months of working on concentration. And so for 2.5 months before he showed up, I worked on concentration, playing with the jhanas, really trying to get deeply concentrated. And he showed up and, he gave us the counting practice again. Same instructions as last time. After about a month, I was getting the nimitta, not just the preliminary, but the steady white nimitta. And he says, oh, don't look at it. Just keep your attention on your breath. Yeah, I got this really amazing thing, and I'm not supposed to look at it. Okay, I try not to look at it, keep my attention on my breath. What's supposed to happen is the nimitta and the breath are to become one, and I absorb into it. Well, eventually that did happen. And when it happened, I was gone. I'm guessing I was gone for about 45 minutes. I had a pretty good idea of how long I'd been meditating before the nimitta just overtook me. And when I came out, I looked over at the clock across the room, and I could tell, I think I lost 45 minutes out of my life. And when I was in that state, no bodily sensations, no sounds, no passage of time. I did cheat and look at the nimitta. And when I did, I absorbed into it, and then it was 45 minutes later. This had to be the state of Naroda. There was no Vedana. There was no perception, right? And so I have an interview with Powok the next day, and I tell him what happened. He goes, good. Do for 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. Okay. All right. So I want to see what happens. So I get the really good nimitta again, and going to see what happens. It took me 3 days to figure out that if you try and see what happens, nothing happens. Okay, don't try and see what happens. Nah, don't think of a pink elephant. Oh, you just all thought of a pink elephant, right? Okay. Never did get back there. I did talk to his French-Canadian monk. I said, because he was sitting in on the interviews, and I said, was that the jhana? Was that the first jhana? He goes, yeah, that's the first jhana. It was the state of Naroda. The Visuddhimagga jhanas are states where you have no bodily sensations, no passage of time, no sounds. You're just gone. You don't know where you were until you come out. Powok said, when you come out, you should look at your heart center. And I pointed to the center of my chest, and he goes, and he pointed off to the side, okay? And then you can see the reflection of the nimitta and tell where you were. So I come out, 45 minutes, wow, that's cool. Oh, yeah, right, look. And I look down. Could I see initial and sustained attention to the meditation object, because that's how Vitakka Vichara is interpreted in the Visuddhimagga. Well, yeah, that's what there was. There was me putting my attention on the nimitta, and then it's sustaining. So I saw that. Okay, look again. And this very sweet wave of piti sukha comes over me. It's like really nice. Okay, there's piti and sukha. Could I see one-pointedness? Yeah, that's all there was one-pointedness, right? And so since I could see those, that meant I was in the first jhana. Now, since I didn't get to the other jhanas, apparently if you got the second jhana, you won't see Vitakka Vichara, you just see piti sukha and one-pointedness, etc. So these are the higher jhanas, and the so-called ninth jhana, the state of Nirodha. And as I say, these are aimed at giving you an even more deeply concentrated mind, except for the state of Nirodha, which doesn't really seem to be all that useful at all. It does say that Mahamoggallana, who was one of the Buddha's chief disciples, entered the state of Nirodha, and when he exited it, he watched his sense of self reassemble, which, he broke through the belief in a self to such an extent he became fully awakened. So maybe exiting the state of Nirodha, you can see yourself reassemble and give you a deep insight. But otherwise, I'd say don't worry about it. All right. 56 minutes past the hour. So at 1 past the hour, we'll do the metta. And tonight's metta, I will just read you the Metta Sutta. And just open up, let the words go through you, let them do whatever they do, and just keep sitting for as long as it feels right for you. Okay, see you in 5 minutes. In order to begin, please put your attention on your breath for a few moments. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who seeks the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down free from drowsiness, one should sustain this mindfulness. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.